Okay, we're doing this. Welcome to my series on, and drumroll please, Twilight. Yes, the series was just put back on Netflix fairly recently, and it's gained its big following it had back in the aughts, and it's back again. So, I was a big fan when it first came out, so I figured I'd give a bit of an analysis on them, um, some brief synopsis, my personal opinions, as well as some other issues that they bring up. So, I hope you have as much fun watching this as I've had making it, because I have had a blast. So, let's continue. Twilight, a cultural phenomenon of a book series that was also turned into a movie series about werewolves and vampires that are, facing against each other, though they all face an incoming looming threat, which we love to see. So, it was written by Stephanie Meyer. Ew, we'll get to that later. The book was released in 2005, the first book that we will be talking about, and the movie was released in 2008. So the series takes place in Forks, Washington, which is in the very beautiful, very plot-relevant Pacific Northwest. The main players we have in this are going to be Bella Swan, who is a human, for now. And then we have Edward Cullen, who is a vampire. And then Jacob Black, who is a werewolf. So we got all the fun fantasy mixes together. Now, they are going to be fighting for Bella's attention because, she's the main girl. She's not like other girls. And, we'll just see how this shapes out through the series. Well, we are now going to be getting into the actual plot, so spoiler alert for anybody who's still worried about that. It's been quite some time. Well, spoiler warning. Now we start with Bella, who's moving home to Washington from her mother's home in Phoenix, Arizona. And, it's quite a change, the dark, gloomy Washington versus the bright, sunny Phoenix. We move in with her father, Charlie, who is the MVP of the series that no one talks about enough, into this nice, completely covered by a blue filter home. This blue filter gets on my nerves the entire time, and I will rant more about it. So be ready. She receives a welcoming gift, which is a beat-up red truck, which is given to her by family friends Billy Black and Jacob Black. Remember that. We then cut to Forks High School. Going back to high school, I'm sure everybody would love that. We are introduced to her friends, to Bella's friends, who very quickly become insignificant in the story. They try their best, though, and, you gotta respect that. This is where we're introduced to the very ever-elusive vampire family known as the Cullens. We have Emmett, who is just the perfect little himbo. We have Rosalie, who deserved way better than she got. We have Alice, who was the lesbian awakening for many a person. We have Jasper, who we'll get to later. And then Edward. Yeah, that's all I got for him, really. They are the beloved adopted children of Dr. Carlisle Cullen and Esme as well. Even though they are adopted siblings, they all seem to have paired off together in relationships, which is weird. As a quick side note, everybody has an opinion on who the most popular, the most attractive Cullen is, and, some people say things that aren't Carlisle, and you are so entitled to your wrong opinion. Anyway, back on topic. Bella makes eye contact with Edward, and that's truly where our story begins. Our plot is filled with extremely clunky dialogue, some very stiff acting, and this blue filter covers everything, makes it look like some sort of Evanescence music video. Personally, I don't fault the actors for this. I think they were working with very little, with maybe some not the best directing, and, they really tried their best with it, and I don't blame them whatsoever, honestly. So a problem that I do have, and it's a bit of just a stickler kind of thing, is the change in vampire logic, like the lore. Things like, these, when they go out into the sun, they sparkle versus the usual, can't go out in sunlight or else you burn up. Um, Another thing is their eye color, and the eye color I'm not completely mad at because they change color from like red if they drink human blood, they turn like amber if they're vegetarians, which the Cullens are. Um, but the problem is they go into natural lighting all the time in this film, and it's never really met with the problems that they have, which is their skin. Uh, you need to choose if sunlight's going to do it, even if it's overcast. That still counts as sunlight. So it's not really an excuse to not have it happen, but I guess if it's not plot relevant, we don't get to see it. Also, my favorite piece of vampire lore, which isn't used enough, is that vampires can't be seen in mirrors or in pictures and things like that. So do you know how funny it would have been if Bella tries to take a selfie with her boyfriend and he just doesn't show up? Like, that's comedy gold right there. They should pay me to write these things. Another point in this plot that I just truly, truly don't understand is, are there no other doctors in the entirety of, like, Washington? We see Carlisle, who is the father to the vampires. He is working in a hospital. And he fixes Bella up after a minor accident involving a skidding car, and then Edward immediately outing them as vampires to her. And he, fixes her up. That's cool. Later, we see him coming out of a crime scene where there was a body found. So, is he the coroner, too? Are there any other medical professionals anywhere? They're in a hospital at some point, right? Where is everybody else? Why does he keep getting all these things? I think he deserves a break at some point, but it's not up to me to write. And I think a funny detail is also, since the beginning, since we start getting introduced to the vampires and everything that's going about it, Carlisle doesn't look at Edward with anything but just true disdain since the beginning. Since he, basically spilled their secret they've been keeping for hundreds of years immediately to this girl he just met. I don't blame him, honestly. So I cannot talk about Twilight without talking about the best scene in film history. I'm not even going to call this part in a movie. This is a film. This is cinematic history, which is the baseball scene. And you know exactly the scene I'm talking about. It's got everything you need. Supermassive black hole, check. We've got Alice doing her cute little pitching thing, check. Jasper doing that cool little bat thing, check. We got Carlisle calling a shot, check. The thunder, check. Even that blue filter can't ruin it. It's just, that really elevated film until that point. And no, you cannot prove me wrong. I do not take criticism. And during this fantastic baseball game, we get to meet our main antagonists of the first movie, which are James, Victoria, and Laurent. They are kind of, vampires that have been wandering. They don't really have a territory, but they wanted to join in this baseball game, They just wanted to have some fun, till they realize that there is a live human there, which then causes a lot of tension because, vampires aren't really supposed to mingle with humans. And so Edward reacts very defensively because that's his girl, and so that sparks James to kind of go on a manhunt, and that is basically the plot of this one. So we go on a big chase, go through states, everybody's worried about Bella, ends in I think it's Arizona, where her old ballet studio was. There's a big, beautiful action sequence, ends with the good guys pulling through. We love to see it. So they killed James, which, in true vampire lore, you gotta tear him to bits and then burn them. They get rid of him. Bella goes to the hospital because not only has she probably broken quite a few bones, she was bit, and to make sure she didn't become a vampire, Edward sucks the venom out of her arm because vampire venom is how they turn. Yeah, and then that's about it. They take her home, and she wants to go to prom. Well, I don't know if she truly wants to, but they go to prom. They have a nice little dance to Flightless Bird American Mouth, which is a great song. They talk about her becoming a vampire, and then that's essentially where the first movie ends. So what we gather from this first movie is essentially the shaky groundwork for a plot. We get the, where the vampire dynamics, we get, the stakes that are being leveled. We get kind of some character introductions, but they aren't very strong, and it just sets the groundwork for what we are about to see through the rest of the films. So how do I personally feel about it? I think it was shaky at best. I think that blue filter will haunt my dreams for as long as I live. I feel like you don't really get a chance to get attached to any of these characters. Like, we get a lot of detail on Bella, but she still feels really, really one-dimensional. Same thing for Edward. We get to see him. We get to see a little bit of character growth where he finally lets his guard down, but there's not much there to really work with. The plot feels very superficial. Feels like it doesn't really have any motivation driving towards the end, which we later find out it does, but it just doesn't feel like it's very memorable, which is not a good way to start a full-blown series. The Cullens that aren't Edward get little to no screen time. We don't get attached to any of them. We do already ruin Rosalie's character, but that's for a later one. Bella feels like a straw man in herself, doesn't feel like she's got a lot of personality. Kristen Stewart really did try her best, and I'm not going to fault her on this. I think it was just really shoddy directing, really shoddy writing, and there's not much you can do with that as an actor. So, there's one part of this movie that I really, really feel like needs talked about that doesn't get talked about as much as it should. In Hollywood, even out of Hollywood, in things like novels and things like comic books, you got like anime and manga, you've got things like this. Society has this weird way of bringing adopted siblings to romantic relationships, and that's not okay. I am not anybody who has an adopted sibling, so I don't want to speak out of hand, but it feels like doing these kinds of things almost degrades the relationship between adopted siblings because they are siblings. So putting them in these romantic settings seems really odd to me. And I know they explain it away later that the Cullens, they met when they were adults, when they were saved by Carlisle, but it's still weird. Like, to quote Anna Kendrick's character Jessica, as she's introducing them, she says, "I'm not even sure that's legal," and then they continue on as if nothing happened. So I think it gets glossed over really badly in many forms of media, and I think it's a very toxic, idea. So I think this is something we need to address more. I think it's something that, like, the consequences really need to be known, and really assert that just because someone is adopted doesn't mean they're not family. That's always just been skeevy to me, and Twilight is really no different with it. So that is the end of what I have for you today. This one is really short because it's just the beginning. We've got 4 more movies to go after this. The last 2 will be combined into one, so don't worry about that. Join me next time for New Moon, which is gonna consist of werewolves, ghost vampires, and really gross misinterpretation of Native American lore. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.